Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Golagri Fungus Descend in Pioneer. It's a list that is very heavily influenced by the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, just because there's a lot of cool new fungus that came out in the set, so I'm very excited to share the list with you. As always, before we hop into the video, let me know at the end, what do you think about the list? Is there any card that I forgot to include or that I should have included? As well as if you have any ideas for upcoming videos, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. So, all right, Golagri Fungus Descend. So it's essentially a fungus deck. That's essentially what we're working with here. And we have some different cards that kind of help filter our graveyard, as well as, obviously, like I said earlier, a bunch of new cards from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So let's go ahead and hop into it here. So our only one-drop creature that we're currently playing is Death Bonnet Sprout, which I really like this card. It's a 1/1 for 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. Then if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, transform it. And it transforms into Deathbonnet Hulk. Turns into a 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on Deathbonnet Hulk. A good card in general. Spoiler alert, we're not going to be wanting to exile a lot of creature cards from our graveyard for the most part. The main reason that we're playing is because, well, it's a fungus, as well as it's able, we're able to mill with the Deathbonnet, I don't remember the first name of it. Sprout. I was going to say not Deathbonnet Hulk, but just a good card in general for our deck. And then our 2-drops that we're playing is Deathcap Marionette and Skullcap Snail. So Deathcap Marionette is kind of secretly a pretty good card for this deck. When it enters, we mill 2, which obviously we're going to want to do that pretty much every time. And it has Death Touch, so it's able to trade up with anything, which is kind of a sneaky effect, especially in a deck like this. This card is just annoying for our opponent. They're going to lose their best creature to this most of the time, and it mills us, so it helps our strategy overall. So definitely a very underrated card in the deck. And I really like Skullcap Snail as well. I've always been a big fan of the 2-mana 1/1s that, make our opponent discard a card or anything like that. And this one is arguably the best of the bunch because it makes them exile a card from their hand. So if they're playing any graveyard deck, they can't just, I'll just discard my Arclight Phoenix. No, it's exiled, so it's actually going to be kind of a pain for you. So that's why I'm a really big fan of Skullcap Snail in general. So our next slide here is what I would say the core of the deck. It's the cards that care about cards being in the graveyard. So we're playing 3, sorry if I butcher this, Aquali, the Seething Tower, 3/3 for 3. As long as there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, it gets +2/+2 and trample. So, I mean, that's a 5/5 trampler for 3 mana. Generally, that's a pretty good rate. But if we have 8 or more permanent cards in our graveyard, it gets +2/+2 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Sorry, an additional. So then it's a 7/7, which is pretty sweet. So I'm definitely a big fan of Aquali. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that very well. Card is definitely very good. But I must say my favorite card in the deck, unsurprisingly, is the Myco Tyrant. 3 mana, star trample. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or saplings. And at the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn, and descending is you descend each time a permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere. So that's from our hand, that's directly from our library. And I'm a big fan of the Myco Tyrant in general, which, spoiler alert, our next slide is going to show some more of the mill cards that we're playing. We're already playing a couple fungus that already mill. So that's kind of a 2-for-1 for us because it's a fungus that's in play, and then it helps mill, so that way we get even more fungus creature tokens, which is just pretty sweet. And then I'm also playing 2 Molder Hulk. So it's 9 mana, but spoiler alert, most of the time it's not going to be 9 mana. It costs 1 less for each creature card in our graveyard, and it's a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is just good. If we're sitting there milling, obviously we're going to hit some lands, they're going to go into the graveyard, so at least we kind of ramp ourselves a little bit back. But the main reason, it's a 6/6 for most of the time, probably 2, 3, maybe 4 mana. So definitely a big fan of Molder Hulk in general. So our next slide here is our last fungus creature, but also the main ways that we're going to fill up our graveyard. So we're playing 4 Spore Crown Thalid. It's a Lord, 2/2 for 2. Each other creature you control that's a fungus or sapling gets +1/+1. So it's a Lord. Really can't really say too much about it. It's just a good Lord, especially good with all of our creature tokens. Once we start making a whole bunch of fungus creature tokens, making them all 2 power is pretty awesome. And then Grisly Salvage and Witherbloom Command, obviously fantastic at filling our graveyard. Very similar to our Golagri Gates deck that we were playing a while ago. We were playing Grisly Salvage, and we're also playing Witherbloom Command just because it's really good. I'm also a big fan of Witherbloom Command because in the post board, people are going to definitely bring in cards like Tormod's Crypt and Rest in Peace, that kind of thing. And Witherbloom Command is very good at getting rid of those. So don't board this card out most of the time. You know, when you're sideboarding, if you want to board out a card like this, I would highly prefer Grisly Salvage, just because Witherbloom Command blowing up a Rest in Peace is going to be pretty huge for our deck, because Rest in Peace is pretty solid against our deck overall. It pretty much stops our entire mill strategy, so just keep that in mind with this deck. So, last slide we have to talk about for our main board is kind of just some basics. We're playing 4 Fatal Push and 3 Liliana the Veil. Pretty standard black cards, some of the best black cards you can play in the entire format. Fatal Push, just a great removal spell. And Liliana's also great because it helps our Descend, which is pretty sweet. So, definitely a big fan of Liliana the Veil, and obviously counts as a permanent card in our graveyard, which matters. So, that's our entire main board except for our lands, and then we also have to talk about our sideboard and some budget options as well. So, we're playing a pretty standard Golagri mana base. We're playing 4 Blooming Marsh, 4 Overgrown Tomb, and 4 Darkmoor Pathway. We're also playing 2 Cavernous Souls because guess what? We're a Fungus deck. We get to play Cavernous Souls. You don't have to have these for the deck. It's not 100% necessary. If you happen to have a Cavernous Souls lying around from a box you opened, go ahead and throw it in there. But if you want to substitute it, just go ahead and substitute like some Llanowar Waste or something like that, which we'll kind of get more into detail with that later in the video. Then we're also playing 1 Takenuma and 1 Boseiju, kind of the same thing with the Cavernous Souls. If you don't have an extra Boseiju, don't worry about it. Not essential for the deck, just kind of an added bonus if you happen to have them. And then rounding out our lands, we're playing 2 Mutavault, because guess what? This is another Fungus, which is pretty funny. So, you know, it can help boost our Myco Tyrant, which is pretty sweet. So definitely a big fan of the Mutavaults. Then we're also playing 1 Forest and 1 Swamp, and I decided to pick the Dominaria United Stained Glass ones because this art is just sweet. I'm a big fan of these. I don't have very many of them, and I kind of want to pick a whole bunch up in bulk just because I'm a big fan of this artwork for sure. So, that's our entire main board. Let's go and hop into the sideboard guide here, which is pretty standard, I would say, for most of my decks that I build on here, especially for Golagri. So obviously we're going to want some graveyard hate. Tormod's Crypt is a fantastic option for that. We're also going to want extra removal cards like Rave Enfeeblement is really, really good. Assassin's Trophy, Abrupt Decay, that's personally what I would recommend. Then we're going to want Damping Sphere and Necromentia, just some really good disruption for our opponent. Obviously, Damping Sphere, we all know what Damping Sphere does in this metagame. Necromentia is very good against combo decks, especially like Lotus Combo, that kind of thing, just because if they don't have their combo piece, they really can't beat us for the most part. As well as Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is Thoughtseize, and Thoughtseize will never change. The card is just fantastic. So, last thing we have to talk about is our budget options, which we are a Golagri deck, so, you know, it's one of the more pricier decks that we generally build on the channel here. But the easiest ways to trim the budget is cutting Liliana and use budget dual lands. So, I would say a good substitute for Liliana, I'm trying, you know, I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. You could really put in an extra removal spell. You can even put in like some Bitter Triumphs. That would honestly probably be pretty good. For budget dual lands, I would recommend, because most of the ones that we featured here are pretty expensive. So I would probably play like Llanowar Waste. You could even play a Deathcap Glade, which is the, that's the slow land from, Innistrad. You could also even play, some tap lands too. You could play like the Golagri Temple if you really wanted to. There's definitely a lot of good options for budget dual lands, and incorporating all that, cutting Liliana and using budget dual lands, you can easily get this deck to under $100. The creatures themselves are not very expensive for the most part, so Thoughtseize, Liliana, and the duels is pretty much the entire deck for the most part, so you can very easily get this deck at a budget rate, which is pretty sweet. So, alright, well, that's the entire deck. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video. Let me know what you think about the deck. Do you already have a Fungus deck and you already built one? Just put it in the comment section below, and I'll definitely take a look at it. Just let me know what you think about this deck as well if you have any recommendations for upcoming videos. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.